One of the things I've struggled with over the years, probably the last 21 years, and just being transparent, is comparison. Like trying to compare myself to where others are or where I want to be. And I actually heard Matthew McConaughey one time in a speech at a graduation. He talked about how he got to a point where he stopped comparing himself to others. He started comparing himself to him. And in the speech, he goes on to say, I'm chasing myself 5 years from now, right? I'm chasing who I want to be 5 years from now instead of chasing somebody else. The dangers in comparing yourself to other people can be real because they can create depression. They can create a self of lack of worth or a lack of accomplishment. And I've stopped comparing myself to others and where they are or even their expectations of where I should be. I've started just looking back at the last 12 months and seeing if I've grown personally. I used to say this a lot, that if you're not ashamed of who you were 12 months ago, you probably did something wrong, right? And so it's a little different of a mindset. Like instead of looking at other people and going, I'm ashamed I'm not where he is or where she is, just look back 12 months ago and say, am I ashamed of where I was? Because if you do that and you do that properly, that means that you've grown, you know. And and the word probably ashamed is probably the wrong word. I use that more from impact and in the word than anything. But looking back at it and going, man, like I can't believe I was there. Like I am so happy that I've grown to this stage or grown to this level or grown personally, right, in my own life, in my own walk, in my own venture with people. But we should be measuring against where we were a lot. And then the other thing is look at, like Matthew McConaughey would say, look at where you want to be 3 to 5 years from now and measure your success from that. As entrepreneurs, we go through growth spurts, right? So like a spurt of growth. And so it's important that we measure the gain and not the gap, right? And the gain is annually. Like, what did we gain this year, right? Instead of measuring the gap. And the gap is in the moment. You know, when you lose weight, what do they tell you? Is don't get on the scale every day.
Don't get on the scale every day?
Don't get on the scale every day. Why? Because you're measuring the gap. You're measuring like the incremental small amounts of gain, and that can be very depressing, right? Entrepreneurship's the same way. Change doesn't happen overnight. And so when we go through change, the gap from, that's happening, if we measure that gap from here to there, and we're measuring it daily, it can be very discouraging, very distracting, by the way. You can get on the scale one day and lose 3 pounds and get back on the next day and gain 1 back, and you're like, what the? This isn't working. And honestly, I see it a lot in entrepreneurs where they'll light a match to all their operation and start over because they live in the gap. They're measuring the gap every single day versus measuring the gain, that growth spurt. And it's funny about entrepreneurship. It's just like life. We go through growth spurts. And so how do we grow quickly when we go through a growth spurt? It's all the things we did leading up to that moment. It's everything that we did in the gap when we went through the growth spurt that helped us grow in that growth spurt. And so I look back at life and I go, okay, what is the growth spurts I've gone through, right? And I try to stay away from measuring the gap in between, because if I measure gap in between, I end up very, very depressed and unmotivated. And so as I'll end this today, I think it's really important that we set times in our lives that we look back and then look forward. Look back at the success we had, look back at where we were, look back at what we accomplished, look back at the gap, look forward at where we want to be. But we don't live in either gap, either the gap in the future or the gap in the past. Because if we live in the gap, we're going to be very disappointed in the results because we're not going to feel like they're coming fast enough. But if we measure just that, that growth spurt, then we'll find success, we'll find peace, we'll find a sense of accomplishment. Measure the growth, not the gap, right? That's the important thing to do. Looking back at life, measure that growth, not the gap, and you'll find success.